We're going to continue looking at more of the wisdom literature in the Old Testament this week. We started off with kind of the obvious wisdom book in the Old Testament last week with Proverbs, and today it takes us to the book of Job. And Job is a book about the deep, hard questions in life that humans have always wrestled with and struggled with 3,000 years ago, all the way up to today. So before we start talking about the book and what's in it, I want us to just spend some time, I want you to spend some time thinking to yourself about questions like that. So spend some time thinking to yourself, what are big questions in life that don't have easy answers? What are things you have really wondered about? You still wonder about? Tough questions that you would really love to ask God if you had the opportunity to get an answer? Just think about some of those tough, deep questions that you've always wondered, that everyone's always wondered. A lot of times those questions might arise during times of deep suffering, when we or someone we love is just really in the depths of hardship and suffering. Maybe it's your life, maybe someone else's life. So what are some things that you've heard when a person was really going through a hard time? What are some things you've heard that people have said to try and make that person or you feel better so that they wouldn't be sad anymore?
God never gives us more than we can handle.
I've heard that.
Whatever that phrase is.
Which
is terrible.
Which kind of implies, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You'll be all right. Yeah.
It's no big deal. You'll be fine.
Yeah, it's all right. It's, kind of walk it off. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, think about what those situations might be that would cause deep suffering or deep questions. Think about words that people have said. Like Sarah Lynn mentioned, oftentimes people will give us kind of short, quick, easy answers to those big questions to try and quickly stop someone from feeling bad, which in one sense is kind of a compassionate act, because it's a person we love. We don't want them to feel bad, so we try and say something real quick to make them stop feeling bad. So I'll say this to you, so you're not sad anymore. You're welcome. But think about how helpful that might be or not when there is deep sadness. Think about, can big questions and deep grief really be comforted so quickly and smoothed away by short, easy answers? I wish they could. I wish they could. Like I've told my kids or someone else who's hurt, my kids are hurting, or someone else I love, I'd say, if I had a magic wand and could take this hurt and sadness away from you right now, I would do it. If I had some magic words that would magically take the hurt and sadness away right now, I would do it. But I don't. But I love you, but I'm here for you. And that's kind of what the book of Job is about. And you could say that the theme of the book of Job is that age-old question of, why do good things happen to bad people? It's something that we've all wondered. If something happens to us, we say, why me? If it's to somebody else, we say, well, why them? Why her? Why him? They don't deserve that to happen to them, we say. And if we were to look back through all the Old Testament books that we've talked about so far the last few weeks, we wouldn't really find much that would help us wrestle with that big, deep question. Because none of those other books, those earlier books, really thought about that question. Why do bad things happen to good people? The earlier books in the Old Testament didn't really try to address it. Because up to this point, the Old Testament writers have seen things very matter-of-factly and very simply, that if you did something bad would happen to you. If you lived good and right things would happen to you. And so by that logic, if something bad happened to a person, what does that tell you? Well, that person must have done something bad. Must have. Because something bad happened to him. That's how it works. And they assumed it went for the whole people, the whole society, the whole country of Israel. If Israel lost a battle, then they believed it was because the people had sinned or disobeyed God, not because they were just outnumbered or out-strategized or whatever. And we can think about a lot of the Proverbs that we talked about last week and other Proverbs and verses in the book of Proverbs. Some of them you can see how it would give the implication of if you do good, your life's good. If you do bad, your life's bad. Kind of a very simple, kind of childlike understanding. And a lot of the Proverbs, like you heard that when we read last week, it said, "Listen, my son," that's good kind of things you would really want a kid to know. Kind of like when they start in school and start in kindergarten, you really want to start with that kind of simple understanding. But then, as they grow and as we grow, we kind of realize that life is a little more complicated than that. And that's where the book of Job comes in. And also the book of Ecclesiastes, which we'll talk about next week. Those books take us into a little more deeper territory. That's kind of not at that simplistic kind of, listen, my son, listen, my child, do good, your life's good, do bad, your life's bad. Job and Ecclesiastes take it into some deeper territory. Like this is kind of the intermediate level of thinking about what happens in the world, how God works, how life works. So Job and Ecclesiastes talk about things that we all learn eventually, that even if you live a righteous and upright life and always make godly decisions, that does not mean that bad things will never happen to you, right? I think we've all lived enough to have learned that. So Job, the person and the book ask questions about that. Now, usually when people study Job, and we studied Job something like 2 years ago, and we talked about it on 1 or 2 Wednesday nights. And back then, and usually when other people kind of study the book, they'll talk about the first few chapters and the last few chapters, because that's kind of when all the action happens, all the drama, all the things that are going on happen in the first few chapters and the last few chapters. At the beginning, Job is described as a perfect man, a righteous man who has a perfect life and a perfect family, lots of kids, lots of livestock, lots of property, lots of servants and employees. But he suffers an overwhelming loss when all of his children die and he loses most everything he owns and he becomes sick from head to toe. That's at the beginning. At the end of the book, God shows up and appears and offers some perspective, and then at the very end, Job is blessed once more. But what often gets overlooked is the huge big chunk of the book in the middle, which is 38 chapters in the middle of the book. So that's what we're going to think about and read and wrestle with tonight, because it is Job and his friends talking with each other, wrestling about what's happened to him and these big questions and ideas. So let me read the end of chapter 2. It gives a little introduction to the big middle section of the book. So this is right after Job has lost everything. I'm going to read chapter 2, verses 11 through 13. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. And they began to weep aloud. And they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. That's pretty incredible. Now, eventually, after 7 days and 7 nights, the friends do start talking, and they do start speaking to Job to try and help their friend Job feel a little better and make sense of everything that's happened to him. And maybe we don't read all these chapters very often because really we just want to know how it ends, right? We don't want to waste our time reading about all these friends kind of talking back and forth. We just want to jump to the end and know what God says. We want to know what the answer is without spending time asking all the questions in the middle. So tonight, that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to get into like the meat of the book of Job and see what his friends have to say. So, let's see. There are 4 friends, because another one comes along later. But we're going to think about Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Now let's see. 1, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11. Let's do, let's see, this table back here, I'm going to give you an assignment. You're going to read what Eliphaz says, okay? And this table here with Dottie, you're in the middle. I'm going to give you Bildad, and then Chris and Brad and Dale, you've got Zophar, okay? So I'm going to give you your reading assignments, and they've each got either 1 or 2 chapters of the friends speaking, and the sheet tells you which chapters to look at. So you all are Eliphaz. You're the first one. Okay, this group is Bildad. And I have starred which chapter to look at. And then Chris and Dale and Brad, you are Zophar. Zophar. And the sheet, which I think is a very helpful sheet, I don't think so. It charts out what the whole book of Job, what the breakdown is, so you can kind of see what chapters are Job's friends speaking, and usually a friend will say something for a chapter or 2 to try and help Job make sense of it all, and then Job will respond for a chapter or 2, usually really, really mad at what the friend has said, and that's understandable given the situation he's in. He's going to be upset and feeling awful anyway, so kind of no matter what's said, he's going to be upset. And so they kind of go back and forth and back and forth. So read the starred passages of your assigned friend and also Job's response. And then in a minute, we'll come back together and we can share with the rest of the group what the other friends said and what Job thought of it. So read and be thinking, and I'll pause the video and let the folks at home, you can pause the video and I will attach the handout in the video description so you can look over the verses and the passages and be ready to think and listen when we're done.
Who is innocent being destroyed?
So Eliphaz was telling Job that Job had done good things in life, and yet people who get destroyed usually aren't innocent people. Is that what Eliphaz is saying? Okay. How did Job respond?
Chapter 6. If Job responded, if all my misery could be placed on the scale, it would surely outweigh the sand of the sea.
So Job is overwhelmed with misery. Sounds like Eliphaz's words didn't really bring him a lot of comfort. Okay?
And he told them, don't talk, just to be talking.
That's good advice for today for many things. Don't talk just to be talking. Yeah, at least to the friends' credit, it said that they were silent for 7 days, but then it seemed like they felt they had to talk to make Job feel better. And Job is saying, don't just talk because you feel like you have to. Okay. So that's Eliphaz. Anything else about Eliphaz or Job's response?
But Job also said, my brothers are as undependable as intermittent streams, streams that overflow, swollen with melting snow, but then stop flowing in the dry season. So his friends just kind of petered out in the drought that Job.
Where were you when I needed you? Kind of. Gotcha. All right, what about Bildad? What did Bildad say to Job, and how did Job respond in this group?
Well, Bildad was blaming.
Oh, he's blaming. Oh, Job, he's blaming Job? Okay.
Bildad's blaming Job for his, fall from grace and his children dying. He says, God doesn't turn on good people. So, and of course, Job answered him saying that, that he had done good. And that he doesn't believe that he's sinless, but he knows he has not been perfect. But Bildad just kind of keeps after him.
Yeah, later in chapter 18, he said to Job, when are you going to stop complaining? I'm tired of hearing you just go on and on and on about this complaining.
Wow.
He said, be sensible, then we can talk. In other words,
Wow.
he felt like Job had gone overboard with his complaining, and he needed to stop it and just calm down and have a reason, what Bildad considered to be a reasonable conversation.
Wow. It's like he was telling Job, like, just get over it. Stop making a big to-do, after all these days.
Then Job said, why are you tormenting me with your words? How long are you going to do this? I thought we were friends, and now you're just tormenting me with your words over and over and over again.
Ouch. Ouch.
And then Job went on to say that evidently God had abandoned me. I've lost everything, and I have no resources now. I have nothing to turn to. And so God's turned away from me. And then I guess Zophar is the next part, but that's where he left it with Bildad.
Okay.
He felt abandoned by God.
Yeah, Job feels abandoned by God, and his friend Bildad is saying, no, you're not abandoned by God, you just must have had it coming, so stop complaining so much.
Yeah.
Okay? Doesn't sound too comforting. All right, this group was reading Zophar, and what did Zophar tell to Job, and what did Job respond?
Really similar to the other friends, that Job's problems had to be caused by something he did.
Why don't you just turn around?
Yeah, confess already.
Just confess what you must have done.
He says, how can you understand the Almighty and all of His ways? Surely you have done something, but if you'll just sort of turn away from that sin, it'll all be like, as we say, you will forget your trouble recalling only as water's gone by.
Oh, that sounds pretty easy to do. If only he just confessed what terrible thing he must have done to deserve all that sorrow, then it'll just immediately get better. Okay. What does Job think about that?
says, do you think you're the only people that matter? And wisdom will die just with you. I have a mind also. I'm not inferior to you. And basically that God controls the situation. God must have been responsible for where I'm at.
And he's questioning, he says, if I've done something, let God tell me what I've done, and I can answer for it, but don't just keep tormenting me without knowing why.
Yeah. Yeah, his friends are saying, either you must have had it coming, or your kids must have been really bad for them to all die, because God rewards the good people and punishes the bad people. It's as simple as that. That's what Job's friends say. And so they think, well, God must have had a reason for being upset with you, so just take your licks, learn your lesson, and then things will be fine again, just like that. So let's say that you were having a really terrible, hard time in life, where there was really sad things going on, and one of your friends spoke to you some of the words that Job's friends spoke to him. How would you feel if someone said those things to you?
I don't think I feel very comforted.
Yeah, not comforted,
Depressed.
maybe even
Angry.
worse.
Angry.
You get upset.
Might not be friends anymore.
Yeah.
And how does that person know what my life's like?
Yeah. Yeah, to make assumptions about me and my kids.
To tell me why this is happening.
Yeah. So definitely, you wouldn't feel better if you were in just the depths of sorrow and someone came up and told those things. You would not be comforted, and you wouldn't feel better. And they would probably think, I'm going to say this and make them feel better, because this can explain everything. It's like them saying, hey, don't worry, I can explain everything. Here's how it is. And thinking, this will make Job feel all the way better. I'm glad I'm here to make all of his sadness go away. Turns out, it's not the case. And like you all said, you would feel, Job feels the same way. He hates what his friends have said to him. So, I want you to think about Job's friends. How would you describe them? What do you think of them? And take a minute to really think about that. And then how would you describe Job's friends?
They were good people, but they didn't understand.
Yeah.
Well, they were following the customs of the day, too. It was the accepted thought that righteous people were not punished and that evil people were. That was accepted. So they just were responding in their own cultural norm.
With the answers they had been given.
I think they started out good, but then got frustrated with Job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they also seem a little bit holier than thou. You know, I would never do what you've done to deserve this.
That's right, because it didn't happen to me. All this bad stuff didn't happen to me,
Look at
so,
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Job actually says, would it turn out well if God examined you?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're all right. I think that the friends started out well. It says they were silent for 7 days, that they were speechless, that they wept to see the state that Job was in. And I think that they really mean well. I think that they legitimately want for Job to feel better. And in that regard, I think they're kind of like us. I think they're like people today, trying to make sense of everything, not doing the best job of it, and not recognizing that sometimes words just fall short. So yeah, maybe they eventually got bothered that Job was still upset that all his children died. And they were like, all right, buddy, it's time to move on. Which again, didn't help him, didn't offer him any comfort. So after dozens of chapters, in the middle of the whole book of Job, and his friends trying to console him, or at least make him stop being sad, at the end of the book, God shows up and speaks to ask Job some questions, and then Job responds. So let me read chapter 38 in Job, verses 1 through 7. And this is God speaking, and then I'll read Job's response. So 38, 1 through 7. Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm and said, "Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy?" And then God goes on and continues throughout that chapter and some of the next chapters. And then Job responds in chapter 42. Chapter 42, I'll read verses 1 through 6. And I encourage you to kind of go back later and read, especially all the things that the Lord said in the last few chapters. And then Job speaks in verse 42, 1 through 6. Job replied to the Lord, "I know that you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, 'Who is this that obscures my counsel without knowledge?' Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, 'Listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me.' My ears have heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself, and I repent in dust and ashes." So it's so interesting that for 38 chapters in the middle of the book, Job's friends are trying to give answers. And then finally, the Lord appears. Now, what does the Lord do? The Lord asks questions. And then at the end, it gives Job this grander perspective. These questions that God is offering, it kind of opens Job's mind to kind of see creation from a more like a macro, kind of like a grand scheme perspective. And it changes him. So the beginning of the book of Job raised the question, can a person still have faith in God despite living in such a messy, uncertain world? And Job's friends answered, yes, because the world is not uncertain. If you suffer, it's your own fault. That's what Job's friends said. But Job doesn't accept that simplistic answer. So we're back to the question, can a person have faith in God despite living in such a uncertain, messy world? And at the end, God seems to say yes, because even though the world is messy, God still acts out of love for you and all creation, and not all suffering comes from your own mistakes. And that helps Job get a new understanding about faith and life, and it's an understanding that we can work on as well, to know that we don't know every detail about how life works or God works, because our minds are finite and God is infinite, but we do know that God loves us. So even if people suffer, when we think and know that they don't deserve it, we can still, always at all times, feel God's love for us, recognize God's love for them, and we can give love back in return. So I encourage you to be thinking about this book and the deep wisdom that's in it, and how it ends not with simple answers, but with deep questions from the Lord that are intended for us to sit with those questions and help give us a new perspective. So be working on that in your own lives this week, because we will come up against suffering and uncertainty and challenges. So let this deep wisdom and this deep message of the book of Job speak and enlighten your understanding as well. We'll pause there and we'll look at the book of Ecclesiastes next week with some more deep wisdom. So go in peace to love and serve the Lord, and I'll see you next week.